Forbidden Vows and Crusader Chaos. Templar Knight versus Assassin. Friends, before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a new audiobook, and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you in advance. Part 1. The Maiden and the Templar's Vow. Chapter 1. The Price of a Harvest. The scent of damp earth and late summer wheat clung to Elara like a second skin, a comforting, familiar shroud. Her 17 years had been spent under the vast, often indifferent skies of rural France. Her hands calloused from the rhythm of the seasons. She was a creature of the soil, simple and strong, with eyes the color of a stormy sky that belied the mundane toil of her life. Yet on this bright, cruel morning, the fields offered no solace. They were instead a vast, whispering witness to her fate. Her father, a good, worn man whose grief for the wife lost in childbirth still etched his face, stood stiffly in the farmyard, clutching his cap. Facing him was not the usual local tax collector or a traveling merchant, but a man who seemed to have stepped directly from a religious tapestry. Sir Kaelen de Valois. He was a Knight Templar, his presence in their humble village of Verdant-sur-Aisne as improbable and dazzling as a fallen star. Kaelen de Valois was everything Elara was not. Taller than any man she knew, his frame was encased in the spotless white mantle of the order, marked by the Crimson Cross, a symbol of supreme piety and lethal dedication. His face, sun-kissed from travel and framed by close-cropped brown hair, was severe, his jaw set with the resolute purpose of a holy warrior. But it was the cold, unwavering focus in his deep blue eyes that stole her breath. He looked at the world, and now at her, with the detached authority of a man who dealt in eternal truths and battlefield absolutes. "The debt is settled, farmer." Sir Kaelen's voice was low, resonant, and utterly devoid of emotion, like the tolling of a great distant bell. Lord Beaumont's generosity, extended in the name of the Order, has been discharged. The lands are secured. Your daughter, Elara, is now bound to the vow. Elara's stomach turned to ice. She knew the truth. A disastrous harvest, an exorbitant loan, and a desperation her father couldn't escape had led to this. Her father hadn't sold his land. He had bought the right to stay on it, and the payment was her life. She was to be the bride of Sir Kaelen de Valois. I cannot, she managed, her voice a strained whisper against the heavy silence. I am a farmer's daughter. I know nothing of courtly life, of knights. I was meant to marry young Jacques from the mill. Kaelen finally turned his gaze fully upon her. It was not a glance of lust or even interest, but of evaluation, like a quartermaster inspecting a necessary but unremarkable piece of equipment. Your life's expectations are irrelevant, mademoiselle, he stated, his tone brooking no debate. The Order requires heirs for its holdings, and its knights must occasionally establish stable houses, lest their family lines dissolve. You are healthy, of good lineage in this district, and of age. You will be my wife. You will bear the name, and you will secure the estate while I am away on Christ's missions. He paused, a flicker of something she couldn't decipher, perhaps pity, perhaps annoyance, crossing his features. It is a marriage of duty, not of affection. Know this, and our arrangement will be simple. Elara's world, once a small, manageable sphere of sun and toil, suddenly fractured. Didi. It was a harsh, cold word to replace love. She looked at her father, whose eyes held a desperate, tearful plea for her understanding. She had no choice. For the sake of his life and their land, she had to accept the white mantle of the Templar's bride. Her resentment, a bitter, fiery lump in her throat, became her silent vow. she would hate this man and his impossible vows. Chapter 2. The Silent Oath. The wedding was a muted affair, a swift mass in the village chapel, presided over by a stern local priest, and a somber evening in the largest estate house Kaelen owned in the region. Elara wore a borrowed, slightly ill-fitting gown, feeling less like a bride and more like a sacrificial lamb being draped in garlands before the altar. The marriage was not consummated that night. Kaelen had been clear. There is time enough for the continuation of my lineage, wife. For now, there is travel and the consolidation of my affairs. In the weeks that followed, Elara learned the rhythm of her new life, a stark contrast to the rough comfort of the farm. Kaelen's estate was grand, staffed by silent, efficient servants. She was the lady of the house, tasked with management and appearance, a gilded cage she paced daily. She spent her days studying the Templar from a distance. He was a paradox. He spent hours in prayer, his devotion palpable, yet his armor was always meticulously maintained, his sword sharp, a reminder that his piety was rooted in violence. He was relentlessly fair with the tenants and loyal to his few trusted squires. Yet with her, he remained aloof, courteous but distant, his true self locked away behind the formidable walls of his faith and his order. Her resentment began to curdle, mixing with a strange, unwilling curiosity. One evening, she found him in the estate's small, seldom-used library, poring over a brittle, hand-drawn map. He wore only a simple tunic, his Templar shield propped against the wall. "You should not be here, Elara," he said, not looking up. "This room is private." "I am your wife, Sir Knight," she retorted, the title deliberately laced with ice. "I am allowed in the house that is now mine. Are you afraid I will spy on your secret plots?" He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "My plots, as you call them, are not for the ears of women, especially one so newly removed from the milk pail." The dismissive arrogance ignited a fire in her breast. She crossed the room, her small figure radiating defiance. "I may have been removed from the milk pail, sir, but I was not raised a fool. I know how to manage a home, a farm, and a ledger. Do you think only your Templar vows hold discipline? My life was one long lesson in discipline, and I will not be spoken to as a child." A muscle twitched in his jaw. He studied her intensity, and for the first time, she saw a slight, almost imperceptible softening in his eyes. A glimmer of respect. "Very well, Elara," he conceded, the corner of his mouth lifting in a fleeting, dry expression that might have been a smile. "You are no fool, but you are still an innocent. The world I inhabit is treacherous, guided by shadows in Rome and blood in Jerusalem. Do not seek to know what could break your faith or shatter your peace." He rose, the sheer force of his presence filling the small room. He was a man built for war, his body powerful, honed by constant training. He came closer, and the air between them grew thick, charged with the sudden, undeniable spark of their proximity. He lifted a hand, and she instinctively braced herself for a touch. Instead, he simply tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a gentle, paternal gesture that somehow felt more intimate, more agonizingly close than a kiss. "Our marriage is an oath of obligation. I do not ask for your love, only your loyalty," he murmured, his breath warm on her ear. "And what do you give me in return?" she whispered, her heart hammering an uneven rhythm against her ribs. "My protection," he vowed, his eyes now blazing with Templar conviction. "Against all enemies, foreign and domestic, for as long as I draw breath." It was not the passionate promise of a lover, but the ironclad oath of a knight. And yet, surrounded by his strength, seeing the undeniable nobility in his face, Elara felt the first tiny, terrifying crack in her wall of resentment. The cold, duty-bound knight was also a man of honor, and that, she realized, might be far more dangerous to her heart than any fleeting passion. Chapter 3: The Crossroads Prophecy. 3 months passed. They were not lovers, but they were no longer strangers. Elara learned that Kaelen loved the scent of wood smoke, that he never ate bread baked with too much yeast, and that his silences were often filled not with aloofness, but with the weary weight of the responsibility he carried. He, in turn, learned of her quick wit, her sharp mind for figures, and her remarkable resilience. Their conversations moved from mundane estate business to debates on politics, and sometimes even philosophy. The distance remained, but a fragile bridge was being built, brick by slow, careful brick, laid across the chasm of their forced union. Elara had found a hesitant, growing respect for him. He was a man of unflinching principle in an age defined by treachery. The resentment began to dissolve, replaced by a deep, unsettling affection. She was falling in love with her husband, the Knight Templar, a man who believed his true marriage was to God and the Holy Land. It was autumn when Kaelen finally received the summons. They were walking in the market square of a nearby larger town, the air alive with the cries of vendors and the smells of spices and leather. A woman was sitting on the steps of the ancient church, entirely out of place amidst the bustling crowd. She was clad head to toe in black, a severe, heavy cloak that swallowed the light and hid every feature save her hands and her eyes. Her hands were thin and pale, clasped over a smooth, dark stone. Her eyes, however, were unforgettable, a startling, icy pale blue that seemed to hold the reflected knowledge of centuries. As Elara passed, the woman's head snapped up, her glacial gaze fixed on Elara, cutting through the noise and the crowd, locking onto her with an unnerving, absolute focus. Kaelen, preoccupied by a conversation with a fellow landowner, did not notice. The woman's voice was a low, dry rasp, yet it carried with chilling clarity to Elara's ears alone. "The road is opening, little leaf. The road to the sun and the sand." Elara stopped dead, goosebumps prickling her arms. I do not understand you, good wife." The woman's gaze fell to Elara's hand, where the heavy, unadorned wedding band of the Templar order rested. "You wear the cross of duty. Soon, it will take you far. It will take your husband's life to the test, and your heart to the balance." The cryptic words unnerved Elara profoundly. The woman leaned forward slightly, her black cowl obscuring her features further, her voice dropping to a powerful, mesmerizing whisper. "The great walls of the city will not hold you safe. When the waters rise, you must choose your path, duty or desire. Look for the serpent's mark in the sands, for it holds both poison and cure." Just as Elara was about to demand an explanation, a sudden cacophony erupted nearby. A cart had overturned, scattering baskets of fruit. When she looked back, the woman in black was gone, vanished. She scanned the steps, the shadows, the crowd. Nothing. It was as if she had been a specter conjured by the market's afternoon heat. Elara's breath hitched. She felt a cold certainty. This was not a common vagrant. This was a warning. That evening, the messenger arrived, a rider, caked in road dust and fatigue, bearing the seal of the Grand Master in Paris. Kaelen broke the seal with a practiced, solemn movement. His eyes scanned the parchment, and the controlled severity on his face intensified, hardening into granite. "It is done, Elara," he announced, folding the letter with meticulous care. "The time for holding lands is over. The infidel presses heavily on the Kingdom of Jerusalem. I am ordered to leave immediately. A secret mission, high stakes, straight to the holy city. He looked at her, his expression softened only by the briefest flicker of the affection she now desperately desired. I cannot leave my wife in France to face the possibility of a long widowhood, nor the machinations of my rivals in the order. The mission will take months, perhaps a year. You will come with me. The news landed like a stone in her chest. Jerusalem. The name itself was a tapestry of ancient history, blinding sun, and ceaseless war. She was terrified, yet a reckless, soaring thrill also took flight. She would not be left behind. She would be by his side. The road is opening. The mysterious woman's voice echoed in her mind. Elara met her husband's gaze, the fear now tempered by resolve. I will prepare the necessary things, Sir Kaelen, she said, her voice steady. I will ride with my husband to Jerusalem. Kaelen nodded, a brief, genuine moment of pride flashing across his face. He extended his hand to her. She took it, the rough, warm skin of his palm enveloping hers. The die was cast. She was no longer Elara, the farmer's daughter, nor Elara, the reluctant wife. She was Elara, the Templar's lady, bound for the most dangerous, holy, and desolate corner of the world. And she was more terrified and more in love than she had ever thought possible. But the woman in black had said, "The great walls of the city will not hold you safe." The journey had only just begun. Part 2, The Desert's Crucible. Chapter 4, Love Forged in Transit. The journey began in a whirlwind of organization and secrecy. Kaelen, operating with the characteristic efficiency of the Templars, procured passage on a merchant vessel bound for the Levant. For the first weeks, they rowed south across the rugged, sun-drenched landscape of southern France, then took to the churning waters of the Mediterranean. Elara discovered that the disciplined knight shed some of his severity when the duties of the order were temporarily suspended. On the deck of the creaking ship, under the immense, star-strewn sky, they talked for hours. Kaelen spoke not of battles, but of the weight of his vows, of the grinding poverty he witnessed in the Holy Land, and of a genuine, if often distant, desire to create a just world. "You see only the armor, Elara," he admitted one night. The salt wind whipping strands of his hair across his forehead. "You see the cross, the gold, the power. But the vows, poverty, chastity, and obedience, they are not ornaments. They are a crucible. They are meant to burn away the man and leave only the weapon of God." "And what part of you resisted the burning?" she asked, her voice soft, dangerously intimate. He looked away, across the black, restless sea. "The part that is human, the part that remembers the smell of my mother's kitchen, the simplicity of a life where duty was just to the fields, not to the whole of Christendom." He finally met her gaze, and in his deep blue eyes, Elara saw vulnerability, raw and unexpected. The part that finds comfort in the silent presence of a sensible, strong woman who does not fear to challenge a knight of the temple. It was an admission of need, not passion, yet it was more profound than any grand declaration of love. Elara reached out, her fingers brushing the rough wool of his mantle where the crimson cross was stitched. "I challenge you, Sir Knight, because I refuse to be a quiet accessory to your life," she whispered. "I want to be your partner, not just your duty." That night, somewhere between the coast of Sicily and the islands of Greece, their marriage of duty finally transformed. The formality was stripped away by the sheer intimacy of shared danger and relentless proximity. Kaelen was not aggressive or demanding. He was tender, a man finding release from the endless pressure of his life in the simple, profound act of connecting with the woman he had married for obligation. Their love became a fervent, clandestine thing, hidden beneath the austere mantle of the Templar. It was passionate and consuming, fueled by the knowledge that this fragile peace, this unity, was fleeting. Elara, once resentful, now burned with a fierce, possessive love for this noble man, who was far more complex and scarred than she had ever imagined. The journey was a glorious, terrifying honeymoon. Chapter 5: Betrayal in the Sultan's Port. They landed in the port of Acre, a teeming, chaotic city in the Crusader kingdom, a vital artery of commerce and conflict. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar spices, human sweat, and the underlying tension of a world teetering on the brink of holy war. Kaelin's mission was critical and shrouded in absolute secrecy. It concerned a recently captured diplomatic courier who supposedly carried vital intelligence about Saladin's movements, now being held by a minor, unscrupulous local lord known as Baron de Morn, near the southern coastal fortress of Ascalon. Kaelin had to retrieve the courier, quietly. They set off, immediately, traveling with a small, trusted escort of 4 Templar squires. Their path took them through scrubland and ancient olive groves, the oppressive heat of the Levant testing Elara's French constitution. She rode bravely, cloaked and veiled, determined to prove herself worthy of Kaelin's trust. The attack came at dusk, near a desolate stretch of wadi, a dry riverbed. It was not a grand Saracen assault, but a swift, brutal ambush. They were not attacked by soldiers, but by men whose movements were fluid, silent, and deadly precise. These were not the common bandits. Their methods were too surgical. Elara watched in horror as one of the squires, Guillaume, fell silently, a dark stain blossoming on his chest before he even hit the ground. A second later, Kaelin roared, drawing his massive Crusader sword, Veritas, truth, the steel flashing in the fading light. He thrust Elara behind a large boulder, his face grim with terror and determination. "Stay down. Do not move, Elara, on your life. They are assassins." The name was a whisper of dread throughout Christendom. They were the Hashashin, the old man of the mountain's loyal disciples, feared for their utter dedication and seemingly supernatural ability to strike their targets anywhere. But why attack a small Templar escort? Kaelin fought with the fury of a desperate man, his great sword sweeping wide, his white mantle becoming spotted with blood, both his own and his enemies. He was magnificent, a living, breathing testament to the myth of the Templar Knight. Just when the battle seemed to turn in his favor, a figure detached from the shadows, unnaturally fast. This man was smaller than Kaelin, clad in dark, flowing garments that rendered him nearly invisible. He wielded a curved dagger, his movements like water, bypassing Kaelin's heavy armor and weapon. He was the most beautiful and terrifying man Elara had ever seen. His eyes, visible only as piercing slits beneath his turban, held the cold, ancient wisdom of the desert. In a horrifying instant, the assassin struck not at Kaelin, but at the rear flank of his remaining escort, drawing Kaelin's attention away for a fatal second. As Kaelin pivoted, the assassin's blade grazed Kaelin's left arm, slicing through the chainmail and drawing a heavy flow of blood. Kaelin roared, stumbling back. "They want something you carry, Templar." The assassin's voice was a low, sibilant hiss, speaking perfect, slightly accented French. "Yield, or she dies." Elara, trembling behind the rock, saw her opportunity. A forgotten water flask lay near her feet. She grabbed it and hurled it with all her strength at the assassin's head. It struck his shoulder. The distraction was negligible, but it allowed Kaelin a moment to recover. "Go, Elara, ride," Kaelin screamed, pushing her towards his own warhorse, which was tethered 10 yards away. "Ride north, Acre. I will hold them." She couldn't. Her feet were rooted in fear, her eyes fixed on the man she loved, bleeding, battered, but still defiant against 3 deadly foes. "Now, Elara, that is an order." The harsh command, the absolute conviction in his tone, broke the paralysis. She scrambled towards the horse. Just as her hands closed on the reins, the assassin who had injured Kaelin threw something small and dark. It landed at the horse's feet. A flash, a deafening boom, and a choking cloud of acrid smoke erupted. The horse screamed, tearing loose and bolting into the night. Elara was thrown violently backward, hitting the ground and seeing only stars and swirling smoke. When the ringing in her ears subsided, she realized she was alone. The dust was settling. The assassins were gone. Kaelen, his white mantle stained crimson and torn, was nowhere to be seen. No bodies, no weapons, only the scattered remains of the skirmish, the eerie silence, and the knowledge of betrayal. Chapter 6. The Labyrinth of Sand. Elara was alive, but utterly alone. Kaelen was either captured or killed, and his last desperate order had been impossible to follow. She found her discarded water skin, half full, and her small travel satchel containing a knife, a meager coin purse, and a crucifix. Her world had shrunk to what she could carry. Her initial panic gave way to a cold, hard resolve. She was the daughter of a farmer. She knew how to survive. She would not ride north to the false safety of Acre and simply wait. Kaelen was on a secret mission to Ascalon. She would follow. She set off south, walking through the night, guided only by the distant, silver-white glow of the Mediterranean. Every rustle of dry brush was a potential assassin, every shadow a new threat. Her journey became a trial of endurance. She used her wits, avoiding main roads, traveling by night, and hiding by day. She bartered a small silver locket for dry bread and figs in a tiny, isolated Syrian village, relying on gestures and the common language of fear. She learned to read the cruel, deceptive face of the desert, its sudden, brutal temperature changes, its lack of mercy. 2 days later, hiding in the ruins of an ancient Roman wellhouse near the coast, she was ambushed. Not by assassins, but by 3 rough mercenaries dressed in mismatched leather and armor, driven by simple greed. They cornered her, their eyes calculating. Well, well, what have we here? A French dove, alone in the jackal's den. Their leader, a scarred man named Ramon, sneered, grabbing her arm with a crushing grip. The Templar who travels with you must be a fool or dead. He is neither, Elara spat, twisting her arm away, the pain sharp but secondary to the rising adrenaline. He will find you. We will be long gone by then. Give us the gold, little lady, and perhaps we will leave you with your virtue intact. As Ramon lunged, Elara was not the farmer's daughter who had feared Kaelen. She was the woman who had watched him fight, who had shared his most secret thoughts, who had learned the hard lessons of survival. She ducked under his heavy arm, pulling the small, utilitarian knife from her satchel. With a desperate, practiced movement that surprised even herself, she slashed at his forearm, a shallow but painful cut that drew a cry of surprise and blood. The momentary shock was her only chance. She turned and ran, scrambling up the crumbling stone of the wellhouse. A sudden, impossible salvation arrived in the form of a flash of dark clothing and a whisper of steel. A figure dropped from the shadows of the roof, landing with impossible softness between Elara and her pursuers. It was him, the assassin who had wounded Kaelen, the one with the ancient, icy eyes. He moved like smoke made solid. The curved dagger was a blur, a dance of death. One mercenary gurgled and fell, clutching his throat. The second, paralyzed by the sheer speed and skill of the attack, tried to flee, but was pinned to the stone wall by a thrown blade. Ramon, seeing the impossible odds, dropped his sword and raised his hands in panicked surrender. The assassin ignored him. He retrieved his dagger, wiping it clean on the cloak of the dead man, then turned his gaze, cold and direct, upon Elara. He was closer now, and she could see the striking features beneath the shadow of his cowl. High cheekbones, skin the color of aged bronze, and eyes that were intensely, unsettlingly green. "You should not have run north, Templar's wife," he said, his voice a low, melodic baritone. "The road to Acre is a serpent's coil of danger, but you ran south, curious." He gestured to the mercenaries. "They are not my quarrel. You are." He approached her, and every instinct screamed for her to run. Yet she was mesmerized by the lethal elegance of the man. He was the antithesis of Kaelin's heavy, noble strength. He was quicksilver and shadow. "Why did you attack us? Where is my husband?" she demanded, clutching her little knife, though she knew it was useless. The assassin stopped inches from her. His presence was overwhelming, carrying the dry, heady scent of exotic oils and desert air. "Your husband, Sir Kaelen, lives, for now. He is being held for the information he carries, not for ransom." He paused, his intense green eyes scanning her face, lingering on the terror she could not hide. "As for why I sought you, you are a loose thread. Templar wives are sometimes more valuable than the knights themselves." He took a slow, deliberate step back. "My name is Safi. I do not kill women unless necessary, but I cannot allow the wife of a Templar to ride freely. You are a threat, a bargaining chip, or a witness." He pointed his dagger toward the south. "You were going to Ascalon. Do not lie. The air carries your intention. Your courage is commendable, but your wits are thin." He made a sudden, fluid movement, and her knife was plucked from her hand before she even registered his movement. "I offer you a choice, Elara of Verdant Serene. Return north now and take your chances with the common road, or accompany me south. I know this land and its shadows. I can lead you near Ascalon, near your husband, for my own purposes. But know this, I am the Templar's sworn enemy. I am the poison." He extended his hand, not in aid, but in challenge, his beautiful, dangerous face unreadable. Elara looked at the dead mercenaries, at the path leading north to safety, and the path leading south to her missing husband. Following this sworn enemy, her heart, already broken by fear and separation, now faced an impossible, devastating choice. She was lost in the sands, caught between the love she had found and the danger she now faced. To go with Safi was madness, but to go alone was certain death, and she would never find Kaelen. Look for the serpent's mark in the sands, for it holds both poison and cure. She swallowed the bitterness of her fear and placed her hand, small and trembling, into the rough, strangely comforting strength of the assassin's palm. "Lead the way, Safi," she said, her voice a tremor of defiance. "I choose to find my husband." Part 3, The Serpent's Mark. Chapter 7, Walking with the Enemy. The journey with Safi, the assassin, was a searing, constant test of Elara's loyalties and her sanity. He was a creature of the Levantine night, silent, swift, and utterly efficient. He moved through the arid landscape with a preternatural grace that spoke of a lifetime spent in shadows, a stark contrast to Kaelin's heavy, armored stride. Elara had expected cruelty, or at least harsh indifference. What she found was a bewildering complexity. Safi was ruthless when necessity demanded, but he was meticulously protective of her. He ensured she drank first from the scarce water sources, taught her which desert berries were safe, and instructed her on how to walk without leaving a clear trail. He never touched her unless it was to guide her past a rocky outcrop or pull her back from a sudden danger, and those touches were electric. Fleeting sparks that left her skin tingling, "Why do you help me, Safi?" she asked one dawn, watching him clean his curved dagger with ritualistic care. They were hiding in a cave that smelled of dust and ancient secrets, the dawn light painting the desert gold. "You hate the Templars. You said I was a bargaining chip." Safi looked up, his green eyes luminous in the half-light. They were the eyes of a desert predator, sharp, intelligent, and disturbingly beautiful. "Hate is a weapon, Elara," he replied, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. "But a weapon must be used for a purpose. You are the path to your husband's secret. A threat, yes, but also a shield. If the Templars seek to recover you, their focus will be on me, not on their captured knight. I use the truth to serve my own purpose." "And what is your purpose?" "Justice," he said simply. "Your husband's order commits atrocities in the name of God. My order seeks balance. And that courier Kaelen was sent to retrieve? That information is vital to prevent needless slaughter. I need your presence to ensure my access to it." He didn't speak of faith or salvation, but of balance and necessity. Where Kaelen offered the promise of heaven, Safi offered the stark reality of the earth. She found herself drawn into his worldview, captivated by the cynical intelligence behind his eyes. He saw the world not in black and white, but in endless shades of gray, a moral fluidity that both terrified and intrigued the fiercely religious woman she had been. The unspoken tension between them mounted with every shared meal, every close call, every silent watch under the relentless stars. Safi represented everything forbidden, her husband's enemy, a man outside her faith, a danger to her very soul. Yet, he was the only one ensuring her survival, and his proximity awakened a desire in her that was dark, compelling, and utterly unlike the noble, tender love she felt for Kaelen. One evening, a sandstorm forced them to shelter, shoulder to shoulder, in the hollow of a rock. The air was choked with swirling dust, and the roar of the wind was deafening. Pressed against him, Elara could feel the hard, lean muscle of his body, the rapid, shallow rhythm of his breathing. The contact was suffocating, overwhelming. "Do not mistake my protection for affection, Al-Ghariba, the stranger," Safi murmured against her ear, his breath hot despite the cold wind. "And do not mistake my reliance for trust, Hashash, assassin," she shot back, though her voice trembled. "You lie," he whispered, his voice dangerously close to her mouth. "You trust me with your life every moment we ride, and I see the fire in your eyes when you look at me, Elara. A fire of forbidden curiosity." He pulled back slightly, giving her space, but the damage was done. His words had cracked the last barrier of her composure. She hated the Templar for forcing her into marriage. She loved him for his nobility, but she was falling into a dizzying, passionate abyss for the assassin, the man who was keeping her alive out of ruthless self-interest, but whose every glance felt like a violation and a promise. Chapter 8: The Weight of the Ring. As they neared Ascalon, the atmosphere thickened. They were in hostile territory, a frontier where Crusader castles dotted the landscape, besieged by Saladin's forces and infiltrated by the assassins. Safi moved with extra caution, relying on complex hand signals and whispers in Arabic to communicate with contacts Elara couldn't see. Elara knew she had changed. The trauma of the attack, the crushing responsibility of survival, and the dark, potent tutelage of Safi had stripped away the farmer's daughter. Her clothes were torn, her face sunbaked, but her eyes were hard, intelligent, and focused. She was no longer a pawn. She was a survivor. She was also deeply, profoundly torn. The love for Kaelen was a noble anchor. It represented duty, safety, faith, and the man who had become her true husband in spirit. The passion for Safi was a reckless, magnificent fire. It represented freedom, rebellion, danger, and the raw, unburdened intensity of the present moment. One afternoon, Safi led her to a hidden ridge overlooking Baron de Morn's small, heavily fortified castle near Ascalon. It was a vicious place, known for its mercenary garrison and its owner's brutal reputation. "Your husband is there," Safi stated, pointing to a high tower. "He is being interrogated by de Morn. The Baron wants the Templar to reveal the rendezvous point for the courier, not for the order, but for himself, to sell the information to the highest bidder." "We must get him out," Elara said instantly, her mind leaping to Kaelin's defense. Safi grabbed her arm, his grit firm. "No, I will get the information. You will stay here. I will infiltrate the castle at dusk. If I do not return by the second hour past midnight, you must go east, find the Bedouin trade route. Do not wait." "No," she whispered fiercely. "I rode here to find him. I won't abandon him, Safi." "Your emotional attachment blinds you," he hissed, leaning close, his scent of musk and heat overwhelming. "You are valuable, but you are not a fighter. You will compromise my mission and seal your husband's fate." Their argument was desperate, silent, raging between them. The sheer closeness, the shared fear, ignited the tension that had been simmering for days. Safi's guard broke. His hand left her arm and cupped the back of her neck, pulling her toward him. "Why do you cling to him?" he demanded, his voice low and ragged, his mask of composure finally shattered. "He took you by contract. He holds you by a ring and a vow. I hold you by will." Before she could form a coherent thought, his mouth crushed down on hers. It was not the tender, deliberate kiss of Kaelin, but a devastating explosion of forbidden need, fierce and demanding. Safi kissed her with the urgency of a man who believed every moment was stolen, every passion a temporary, vital insanity. Elara fought for a brief, agonizing second, remembering the white mantle, the crimson cross, the solemn oath she had taken. Then she surrendered. She met his kiss with a devastating need of her own, a desperate desire for the raw, unbound passion he represented. It was a betrayal of everything she believed in, a violation of her sacred vows, and it was the most real she had ever felt. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing heavily, their eyes wide with shock and shared guilt. Safi's face was a study in self-loathing and furious intensity. "That," he choked out, his voice hoarse, "was foolish. It changes nothing." "It changes everything," Elara whispered, trembling, touching her lips. The taste of him, salt and dust and dark spices, was intoxicating, overwhelming the memory of Kaelin. Safi recovered his composure instantly, the assassin's mask snapping back into place. He looked at her hand, where the simple, heavy silver ring of the Templar wife felt suddenly cold and leaden. "You have chosen your path, Elara, but your heart is now torn," he stated, his voice flat and final. "You must decide which oath holds the most weight. Your duty to the Templar, or this passion you despise, yet crave." He gave her a final, chilling instruction. "I am leaving. There is an underground cistern 2 hours north of here, towards the coast. I will take Kaelin there if I succeed. If I do not return, you go to the cistern, rest for 1 day, and then continue your escape. Do not interfere." With that, he melted away, disappearing into the rocky shadows toward the castle. He left her standing alone, utterly desolate, the illicit taste of his kiss still burning on her lips. She was no longer innocent. She was now a woman caught between two impossibilities: her noble, duty-bound husband, and the passionate, beautiful assassin who had just irrevocably claimed a piece of her soul. The weight of the Templar ring felt unbearable. She had found Kaelen, but she had lost herself. Chapter 9: The Impossible Choice. Elara waited in agonizing tension on the ridge as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and violent red, a suitable backdrop for the betrayal she had just committed. The hours crawled by. She saw figures moving in the castle courtyard. She heard the faint, distant clang of a heavy door, a sound swallowed by the vast, open desert. But she saw no signs of infiltration, no chaos, no signal of Safi's presence. As the second hour past midnight approached, Elara's nerves snapped. She could not simply wait. She had vowed to herself she would never be a passive figure in her own life again. "Do not interfere," Safi had commanded. "Do not compromise the mission." "I will not abandon him," she vowed. She knew the cistern was north. That meant she had to circle the castle and move along the coast. But Kaelen was inside. Safi was inside. If she could only draw attention, create a diversion, perhaps she could aid both the man she loved and the man she passionately desired. She crept down the ridge, moving toward the castle's outer walls. She saw a supply wagon, unattended, loaded with dry fodder for the horses. An idea, reckless and desperate, formed in her mind. A sound startled her, the soft, dry whisper of roads on stone. A figure emerged from the deep shadow cast by the wall. It was the woman in black, the spectral fortune teller from the French marketplace. She stood perfectly still, her black cowl a void against the dusty wall. "You have arrived at the precipice, little leaf," the woman rasped, her voice like grinding sand. "The point of no return. You are marked by both the cross and the serpent." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She was hallucinating from fear and lack of sleep. "Go away. I am not interested in your prophecies." "You will be, for the choice is now. Elara, the path that allows you to survive and to grow. One man represents your past vow. The other represents your future freedom. Choose wrongly, and you will doom not only them, but yourself to the pyre." The woman's icy gaze locked onto the silver ring on Elara's finger. "The time for waiting is over. Your choice is made not by your mind, but by your actions. The third path is always the most dangerous, the most lonely, and the only one that truly belongs to you." With that, the woman in black lifted her hand in a gesture of profound finality, turned, and disappeared into the dense, silent shadow, leaving no trace. Elara stared at the wall, her breath catching in her throat. The third path. She looked at the fodder wagon, then at the distant coastline. The cistern was a path of escape. The fire was a path of confrontation. She straightened her spine, gripping the small, sharp knife she had recovered. She would not escape yet. She was a Templar's wife, betrayed and deeply in love with two enemies, but she would act. Her choice would not be to aid Kaelen or Safi, but to aid their collective escape. She found a piece of flint and steel in the wagon's corner. With trembling hands, she struck the spark. A tiny, fragile light blossomed in the straw. The path that makes you strongest. She was choosing confrontation. She was choosing herself. As the fire took hold, beginning to consume the dry fodder with a hungry roar. Elara turned her back on the blazing wagon and began to run toward the shadows of the castle gates, not waiting for the inevitable chaos that would ensue. She was going in. Part 4, The Unholy Alliance, Chapter 10, Chaos in the Citadel. The fire at the supply wagon erupted with a violence Elara had not anticipated, fueled by the dry desert air and volatile animal fodder. Within minutes, the alarm bells were clanging wildly across Baron de Morn's citadel. Torches flared into activity as guards spilled out of the barracks, yelling and scrambling toward the source of the blaze. Elara used the precious seconds of distraction, racing along the shadowed outer wall, searching for an entrance. She found a rarely used postern gate, shielded by an overgrown fig tree, which the panicking guards had momentarily abandoned. With a surge of desperate strength, she used her small knife to pry at the rusty latch, forcing it open just enough to slip through. She was in the inner courtyard. The air was thick with smoke, panic, and the smell of fear. Kaelen was being held in the central keep's highest tower, a fact she had gleaned from overhearing Safi's meticulous planning. She kept to the deeper shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs as she navigated the confusing stone corridors. Praying the chaos would cover her entry, she reached the tower staircase. Guards had been pulled to the courtyard, but two heavily armed men still stood watch at the base of the winding stairs. Elara pressed herself against the cold stone, realizing the futility of facing them. She needed a diversion, and she needed it now. As if conjured by her desperate thought, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling 20 feet above, descending soundlessly on a rope. Safi. He wore the dark, flowing garb that made him one with the night, and his face, briefly illuminated by a passing torch, was a mask of furious concentration. He saw her, and for a fleeting instant, a look of utter disbelief and rage crossed his features. She had defied him. She had risked everything. Safi did not waste time in rebuke. His mission was compromised, but now he had to manage the fallout. He dropped the last few feet, landing silently behind the two guards. Before they could react, a blur of movement, a swift, terrible efficiency, and the men were silenced, their heavy bodies collapsing without a sound. Elara rushed forward. "Kaelen!" "Silence," Safi hissed, grabbing her arm with a punishing grip. "Your fire was foolish. It sealed our fate. Now, if you utter one more word, I swear I will leave you here. Up, now." He pushed her up the winding stone steps ahead of him, his presence a dark, terrifying force at her back. Chapter 11. The Prisoner and the Promise. They reached the interrogation room. The door was heavy oak, bound with iron. Safi knelt, working a set of thin, specialized tools into the lock with breathtaking speed and precision. "Why are you helping me?" Elara whispered, watching his nimble fingers. "You risked your life for him, Elara," Safi murmured without looking up. "You forced the choice. Now I must finish the job, or my own reputation among my contacts is ruined." "This is not about affection. This is about control." The lock clicked open. Safi drew his dagger and kicked the door inward. Inside, the scene was horrific. Kaelen de Valois sat chained to a stone chair, stripped of his armor and mantle. He was bruised, his lips split, and there were dark, wet stains on his tunic. He was not broken, though. His blue eyes, though weary, still burned with the unwavering fire of the Templar. Facing him was Baron de Morn, a stout, cruel man with greasy hair and a sneering face. "Speak, Templar!" De Morn was shouting, slamming a gauntleted hand on the table. "Where is the rendezvous point for the courier and the parchment? Tell me, and the torture stops." Kaelen simply spat blood onto the floor. "Go to hell, Morn. I serve God." The Baron raised a heavy iron poker to strike, Before it could land, Safi moved. The assassin was across the room instantly, his dagger pressed against the Baron's throat. "No more interrogation, Baron. The game is over," Safi stated, his voice devoid of heat, utterly chilling. De Morn gasped, paralyzed by the sudden, impossible threat. Kaelen, seeing the intervention, frowned, his expression darkening with suspicion. Then he saw Elara standing in the doorway, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes wild. "Elara, by the cross!" "I brought the assassin, Kaelen," she choked out, stepping into the room. "He is my protector. He knows the way out." The air in the room became instantly charged, crackling with violence and betrayal. Kaelen's noble face contorted with a confusion and pain more profound than any torture. He looked from his bloodied, beautiful wife to the dark, lethal figure holding his captor. Safi, without lowering his blade, addressed Kaelen, his voice ringing with bitter finality. "Sir Templar, your wife defied my command to save your life. For this night, we are forced allies. I want the information on the courier. You want your freedom. Barter, now." "I will never deal with the Hashashin," Kaelen growled, his whole body tense with outrage, straining against the chains. "Then you die, and I take the information from your corpse," Safi countered simply. "Your wife dies trying to escape this slaughterhouse alone, and your holy cause is lost. Choose duty to the Order's mission, or blind faith to your vow of eternal enmity." The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant yells of the guards dealing with the fire. Kaelen stared at Elara. He saw the grim determination, the exhaustion, and the undeniable terror in her eyes. He also saw the faint trace of the desert, of Safi's world, etched on her face. The truth of her journey was written there. Slowly, painfully, Kaelen nodded. "The courier is meeting the Grand Master's agent at the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, tomorrow at dawn. The message is simple. Saladin moves at the harvest moon. Now, release me." "A fair exchange," Safi conceded, accepting the information. He then glanced at Elara. "A woman's passion is a dangerous key, Templar. Be wary of what you have unlocked." Safi struck the Baron hard, rendering him unconscious, and then swiftly used the Baron's own keys to unlock Kaelen's chains. Kaelen stumbled to his feet, weak but instantly alert. His first act was to grab Elara, pulling her tightly against his chest, crushing her against the solid comfort of his body. "I thought you were dead, my love. I failed you." The embrace was overwhelming. Duty, faith, and noble love washing over her. She clung to him, momentarily forgetting the dark fire of the assassin. Safi stood apart, watching the reunion with cold, detached intensity. "Sentiment will kill us. We must move. I know the subterranean passage leading to the old Roman sewers. We exit near the coast. Follow me, Templar, or die here." The unlikely alliance was formed in the crucible of absolute necessity. The Knight Templar and the assassin, united by the fierce courage of the woman caught between them. Chapter 12, Escape into the Shadows. Their flight through the castle's bowels was a nightmare of damp stone, tight spaces, and sudden, lethal encounters. Kaelen, without his heavy armor and sword, was at a disadvantage, relying on his formidable strength and battle wits. Safi, however, was in his element. He moved silently, always anticipating the guards' movements, his dagger striking with deadly precision. Elara, trapped between the two men, felt the unerrable weight of her divided heart. She needed Kaelen's stability and strength, but it was Safi's dangerous, intuitive knowledge that was saving their lives. At one point, they were cornered in a narrow corridor by 4 heavily armed mercenary guards. Kaelen and Safi found themselves fighting back to back, a striking contrast in fighting styles. Kaelen, powerful and defensive, using his fists and sheer bulk. Safi, fluid and aggressive, striking for quick, vital points. "The Templar fights like a bull," Safi grunted, ducking under a sword sweep. "And the Hashashin fights like a venomous snake," Kaelen retorted, snapping a man's neck with a brutal twist. But they were effective. They covered each other instinctively, bound by a temporary, unspoken trust that was shocking in its effectiveness. As the last mercenary fell, Kaelen found his discarded sword, Veritas, near the armory. The moment the steel was in his hand, the noble warrior was resurrected. "Elara," Kaelen said, his voice husky with strain but absolute. "You stay behind me, always." Safi scoffed. "She is not one of your squires, Templar. She is the reason we live." Kaelen ignored him, focusing only on Elara. He pulled her close and stared into her eyes, searching for an answer to the confusion he had seen there. "What happened, Elara? How did you find him? Did he hurt you?" He was asking about her fidelity, about the breach in their marriage, about the truth of her solitary journey. Elara knew she couldn't tell him everything. Not now. Not when their lives depended on Safi's guidance. "He found me when I was near death," she lied, the words tasting like ash. "He guided me, Kaelen. He is only here for the courier's information. I am fine." Kaelen's gaze narrowed, but he accepted the answer for the moment. The need for escape was too urgent. Safi, observing the tense exchange, only smiled, a cold, knowing expression that promised future conflict. "The tunnel is ahead. Be swift. Dawn is approaching." Chapter 13. The Coastal Crossroads. They emerged onto the dusty coast under the sliver of a waning moon. The air was cool and salty, a blessed relief after the foul heat of the sewers. They had escaped, but the danger was far from over. Ascalon was now directly north of them, and Jerusalem was a grueling ride further east. Kaelen was weakened, but his duty was paramount. "We must ride for Jerusalem now. I must deliver the intelligence to the agent at the Dome of the Rock before morn's mercenaries catch us." Safi stepped forward, blocking their path. "No, you ride to the rendezvous alone, Sir Templar. Elara stays with me." Kaelen drew Veritas, the massive sword shimmering under the moonlight. "Never. She is my wife. You will not touch her again, assassin." "She is a witness, a distraction, and I believe a choice," Safi countered, drawing his curved dagger. "I have held my end of the bargain. I delivered you. Now I claim the reward, her silence, and perhaps her allegiance. She belongs to the journey, Templar, not the vow." Elara stepped between them, her own small body a fragile barrier against the 2 lethal men. "Stop," she cried out, the despair and exhaustion of the night finally breaking her composure. "You will not fight over me, not here. I am not a prize or a token. I am the one who risked my life for both of you." She looked at Kaelen, her true love, the embodiment of honor. "Kaelen, you must go. Your duty is vital. If Saladin attacks too early, thousands will die. Go, I will not slay you down." She then turned to Safi, the man who had stolen her innocence and awakened her desire. "And you, Safi, you need the intelligence confirmed. We both go with Kaelen to Jerusalem. We stick together until the mission is accomplished. After that, I make my own decision." Safi studied her, her defiance, her newfound strength. He saw the fire of self-determination, the third path she was forging. He sheathed his dagger. "Very well, Elara," he conceded, a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. "Jerusalem, but know this. In the holy city, the walls are thin, and the shadows speak. The battle between us will be fought there, not with steel, but with love and faith. Kaelen, exhausted and wounded, reluctantly accepted the arrangement. He mounted his recovered horse. Safi had arranged for its retrieval near the escape route. Elara mounted behind him, clinging to the warmth and safety of her husband's noble frame. Safi, a solitary, dark shadow on a fast mare, led the way eastward toward the blinding light of the holy city, the epicenter of their conflict. Elara was heading toward a reunion with her faith and her love, but she knew she was bringing the forbidden fire of the enemy with her. The triangle was complete, and Jerusalem would be the judge. Part 5, The Walls of Contention. Chapter 14, Jerusalem, the Gilded Cage. Jerusalem, the promised city, was less a spiritual beacon and more a fortress simmering with internal tension. It was crowded, noisy, and dangerously fractured. Crusaders in shining armor, solemn priests, and foreign merchants jostled against local Christians and wary, oppressed Saracens. Kaelen immediately took Elara to the main Templar fortress, a massive, imposing structure near the old city walls. She was given a small, secure apartment suitable for a knight's wife. She was safe, finally, back under the protection of the Crimson Cross. But the safety felt like a gilded cage. The tension between Elara and Kaelen was a palpable, silent force. He was relieved she was alive and successful in aiding his escape, but the knowledge that she had survived by riding with his sworn enemy, an assassin, was a festering wound. "He held you captive, Elara," Kaelen insisted later that day, after delivering the critical message to the Grand Master's agent at the Dome of the Rock. He spoke quietly, but his blue eyes were tormented. "He saved my life, Kaelen," she countered, her own voice steady, fueled by the memory of the desert and Safi's fierce protection. "We were allied. It was an act of survival, not treachery." "An assassin cannot be trusted," Kaelen said, running a tired, frustrated hand over his scarred face. "His touch, his guidance, it is poison. You are stained by his deceit, wife. You must cleanse yourself of his influence now that you are under the protection of the Church." The word poison struck her, echoing the mysterious woman's prophecy. She felt a cold wave of realization. Kaelen saw her experience as something dirty, something to be scrubbed away by his faith and duty. He didn't see the strength she had gained, only the threat of the enemy she had encountered. The chasm widened. Kaelen sought solace and redemption in his vows, throwing himself into Templar duties, meetings with the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the head of the local Catholic Church, and political maneuvering to strengthen the kingdom. He treated Elara with renewed tenderness, but it was the tenderness of duty, of a man trying to reassure himself that his possession was intact and untainted. Elara, meanwhile, felt suffocated. The political machinations of the Templar order, the pride, the wealth, the ruthless pursuit of power justified by piety, jarred against the raw honesty she had found in the desert. She thought constantly of Safi, a man who spoke of justice and balance rather than salvation and dominance. Chapter 15, The Serpent in the Garden. Safi, true to his word, had arrived in Jerusalem. He blended into the teeming city, a ghost in the Saracen quarters, occasionally sending Elara cryptic messages delivered by street children or veiled peddlers. His messages were brief, asking for information on Kaelen's movements and the Templars' plans regarding the captured Baron de Morn. Elara found herself playing a dangerous, unwilling double game. She provided Safi with only information she knew would save lives and maintain the delicate, explosive truce between the orders. She felt she was the only person with loyalty to both men, attempting to manage a fragile peace. One night, Safi risked a physical meeting. Elara used the pretext of visiting a distant local church for confession and prayer, a necessary action to counter the guilt she felt over their shared kiss. They met in the ruins of a Roman theater outside the city walls. bathed in cold moonlight. Safi wore simple, worn robes, looking like any other merchant, yet his presence commanded the space. "You are Finn," he noted, his green eyes scrutinizing her face. "The gilded cage does not suit you, Algoriba." "Your freedom is a heavy cloak, Safi," she retorted, trying to maintain distance. "Talon suspects everything. I cannot risk him discovering our communication." "And what of your heart?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "Does your pious husband comfort the part of you that craves the truth of the desert? Or does he only demand your obedience?" "He is my husband. I am bound by oath and faith," Elara said, the words feeling weak and hollow even to her own ears. "Faith is a fine wall, Elara, but desire will always find the crack." He reached out, his finger tracing the high arch of her cheekbone. "Look at me. Do not look at the cross you wear. Look at the man who has seen your courage, who held your life in his hands, and who did not demand your duty, but won your trust. His touch was the match to the gasoline." Elara leaned into the contact, a silent acknowledgement of the burning desire that still raged beneath her Templar piety. "What do you want, Safi?" she gasped, her resolve crumbling. "I want the truth." Aaron de Morn's mercenaries are moving the captured Templar courier to Rome on the orders of the Patriarch, Safi revealed, his voice sharp with urgency. "The Church wants the intelligence for their own power, not to save the kingdom. If that message reaches Rome, it destabilizes Saladin's truce with the local Christian lords, guaranteeing a wider, bloodier war. I must intercept it. Where is the courier being held now?" This was a true conflict of loyalty. The Patriarch was Kaelin's highest spiritual authority. To aid Safi was to betray the Catholic Church itself. "I don't know," Elara whispered, pulling back. "Kaelin would never tell me a secret of that magnitude. It is a matter of the Church." "The Church is corrupt, Elara. It serves gold, not God." Safi's frustration was evident. He knew she was holding back, not information, but herself. He took her face in his hands, his eyes blazing with desperate passion. "I will not let them destroy the city in their greed. Come with me, now. Leave the cross and the lies. Be free. Be mine." He kissed her again, a deep, consuming claim that wiped away the memory of the Templar walls and the sanctity of the Church. This time, Elara did not fight it. She kissed him back with a fierce, reckless abandon, acknowledging the forbidden, exhilarating truth that he, the enemy, was the man who truly saw her. As they broke apart, breathless, the assassin's face was alight with hope. "Tell me where the courier is, Elara. We leave tonight. We will escape this city and its wars." Elara's heart pounded, divided between the impossible choices. Before she could answer, a rough voice cut through the silence. "Traitors! Adulteress! Heretic!" A figure emerged from the shadows. Brother Thomas, Kaelin's most loyal and zealous squire, who had clearly been tracking Elara on Kaelin's subtle orders. He was not alone. 2 Templar sergeants stood with him, armed with heavy swords. "An ambush!" Safi hissed, already drawing his dagger. "You were followed, Elara. Your secret is exposed," spinning to block the Templar's heavy blade with his dagger. Elara froze, unable to move. She saw Kaelin's men fighting his enemy. She saw the full, horrific realization dawning on Brother Thomas's face. A wife of the noble Knight Templar, kissing an assassin, caught in the act of treachery. Safi managed to wound 1 sergeant and knock the second off balance, but Brother Thomas was relentless. He ignored Safi, lunging straight for Elara, his face contorted in pious rage. "You have stained the order. You will face the Patriarch's judgment." Tomas roared, grabbing Elara's arm with a strength born of moral fury. Safi saw the danger. He could kill Tomas, but it would seal Elara's fate as an accomplice. Instead, he threw a small, intricately carved metal sphere at the ground near them. It detonated with a flash of light and a cloud of thick, acrid smoke. In the ensuing chaos, Safi grabbed Elara's arm, pulling her toward the exit of the ruins. But Brother Tomas's grip was locked on her other arm. "She stays," Tomas screamed, dragging her back. "No," Elara cried out, physically torn between the noble zealot and the passionate outlaw. Safi looked at her, his green eyes filled with a desperate, agonizing love. He knew he couldn't fight Kaelin's entire order. He had to save her life, even at the cost of his own freedom. With a final, wrenching pull, Safi released her arm, turning his fight not to escape, but to cover her capture. He wounded Tomas just enough to give Elara a clean path. "Go to Kaelin," Safi commanded, his voice raw. "Tell him everything. Tell him the Patriarch is moving the courier. I will buy you time." Then, with a devastating show of tactical retreat, Safi slipped away into the absolute darkness of the outer desert, vanishing just as the smoke cleared and more Templar reinforcements arrived. Elara was left standing, captured, bruised, and weeping, in the absolute grip of Brother Tomas and the Templar sergeants. Her face was streaked with tears and guilt, her body aching from the physical conflict, and her heart shattered by the forced choice. Chapter 17. The Judgment. Elara was brought back to the Templar fortress, not as Kaelin's wife, but as a prisoner. Kaelin was immediately summoned, his face pale with shock and unbearable pain. The story had already reached the ears of the Patriarch of Jerusalem, who saw this as a perfect opportunity to exert control over the powerful Templar order and eliminate any threats to his political maneuvers. Elara was dragged before a hastily assembled tribunal, presided over by the Patriarch himself, a severe, aging man named Bishop Anselm, and a small contingent of Templar lords, including Kaelin. The accusations were read: adultery, espionage, and heresy by association with the enemy. "Lady Elara de Valois," the Patriarch began, his voice booming in the sterile hall. "Your betrayal is proven. You consorted with the Hashashin, the enemies of Christ and the Church. What say you? Do you confess to treason against your husband and your faith?" Elara stood tall, exhausted but resolute. She would not lie, but she would not betray the mission or the men who loved her entirely. "I confess I was captured by the assassin, Safi," she began, her voice gaining strength. "I confess he used me to gain information on my husband. But I confess no treason. I confess only that I have been a pawn in a larger political game, orchestrated by greed, not faith." She looked straight at Kaelin, her eyes pleading for him to understand the greater threat. "Kaelin, you must listen. Safi told me. The courier is being moved. The Patriarch is colluding with Baron de Morn to sell the intelligence to a rival faction in Rome. It will ensure the collapse of the truce and the war you fought so hard to prevent." A gasp went through the room. Bishop Anselm's face turned livid. "A lie! Blasphemy! The desperate ramblings of an adulterous heretic," the Patriarch screamed, slamming his staff down. "Your lies only deepen your guilt. Her relationship with the infidel is proven. The penance for a Templar's wife caught in the act of consorting with the enemy is swift and terrible." He looked directly at Kaelin, forcing the knight's hand. "Sir Kaelin, your loyalty is now tested. You must disavow this woman. Your sacred vow demands that you turn her over to the judgment of the Church. She is guilty. If you protect her, you betray the order." Kaelen was trapped. His face was a mask of devastating internal conflict. He loved Elara fiercely and nobly, but the Templar vows were his life, his soul. And he had seen the proof of her betrayal, the kiss, the lies, the struggle in the moonlight. He looked at Elara, at her resilience, her courage, and the desperate truth in her eyes. He thought of the corruption he knew existed in the church, the greed of Morn, and the strategic accuracy of the information Safi had provided regarding Saladin's movements. He took a slow, deliberate breath, drawing himself up to his full height. He had to choose between his personal honor, his duty to the order, and the woman he loved. And in that moment, Kaelen de Valois made the only choice he could, the noble sacrifice. "My wife is confused and distraught," Kaelen began, his voice raw but controlled. "I cannot disavow her, but I cannot allow her to speak blasphemy against the church either." He looked at the patriarch with steely resolve. "My loyalty to the order is absolute. I will accept the penance for my wife's crimes, in the hopes that she may find peace and forgiveness." He stepped forward, a white, resolute figure of self-sacrifice. "I ask that you accept my life, my rank, and my personal fortune as penance for the sin of my house. I will return to Europe and exile myself to a remote monastery for the rest of my days. But I demand safe passage from my wife Elara to return to her family in France. She is to be spared the Inquisition. I will not have her blood on the hands of the order." The offer was devastatingly sincere and politically impossible to refuse. The patriarch, eager to eliminate Kaelen's growing influence and seize his wealth, readily agreed. Masking his triumph behind a veil of false mercy, Kaelen had sacrificed everything for her life, even the noble life he was returning to. He had proven his love was deeper than his vows. Elara watched him, tears finally streaming down her face. The man she had resented, the man she had come to love, now choosing death by life for her survival. She was spared the pyre, but she was now a pariah, a widow in exile. The only question that remained was how to secure her safe passage out of the holy city, a passage already secured by the assassin's ultimate purpose. Part 6. Destiny's Mark. Chapter 18. The Noble Exile. Kaelen's sentence was final, his sacrifice absolute. Stripped of his white mantle and sword, he was placed under guard, awaiting passage back to Europe and the silent death of a secluded monastery. He never spoke of Safi to Elara again, acknowledging the choice she was forced to make, and accepting the burden of her survival as his ultimate penance. Before his departure, Elara was allowed a brief, final meeting with him in the Templar chapel. He was dressed in simple traveler's wool, yet his nobility shone through. "You have given up everything, Kaelen," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. She reached out, touching the place on his shoulder where the crimson cross was usually stitched. "I am sorry. I broke my vow." Kaelen took her hands, his gaze clear and deep, devoid of anger or judgment. "I broke my vow first, Elara. I used you for the order's sake, and when the truth was demanded, I found that my vow to you, to protect you with my life, was the only one that truly mattered." He leaned in, his lips brushing her forehead. "Do not seek blame. Seek life. You are strong, wise, and you have survived. Go back to France, to the soil, and forget the blood and the sand." "And Safi?" she asked, the name a painful wedge between them. Kaelen's eyes hardened only slightly. "He is the storm, Elara. Necessary, perhaps, but destructive. Leave the storm behind. Embrace the quiet." Their farewell was devastating, a final, absolute acceptance of a love forged too late and extinguished by an impossible conflict of loyalties. Kaelen was led away, walking toward his eternal, living tomb, the noblest man she had ever known. Elara was left standing in the chapel, holding on to the memory of his sacrifice, a debt she could never repay. Her passage was arranged on a ship bound for Marseilles. Scheduled to leave in 3 days, the Templars, eager to be rid of the source of scandal, would escort her to the port gates. Chapter 19. The Assassin's Final Gift. The night before her scheduled departure, Elara received one final, urgent message, a small, dark feather left on her windowsill, a common symbol used by Safi's contacts. The attached parchment held only 3 words: the aqueduct, midnight. Elara knew the risk. If caught, the patriarch would retract his mercy and claim her life instantly, negating Kaelen's sacrifice. But she couldn't leave without a final farewell, a final truth. She slipped out of the Templar quarters, moving with the practiced stealth Safi had taught her in the desert. She reached the meeting place, a crumbling section of an ancient Roman aqueduct just outside the city walls. Safi was waiting for her, standing atop the stone arch, silhouetted against the dark sky. He had a horse tethered below, swift and ready. "You came," he said, his voice a low, melodic relief. He jumped down, landing silently before her. "I had to," Elara replied, her breath catching. "Kaelen is gone. He sacrificed everything to save me from the Inquisition." Safi's face, carved in the moonlight, showed a flicker of profound respect. A noble end to a noble man. He chose his love over his order, the ultimate victory over his vows. He stepped closer, closing the distance, and the passionate electricity instantly returned. "I came to do what Kaelen cannot. He gave you safety and nobility. I offer you freedom." "My freedom is already bought by Kaelen's sacrifice," Elara insisted, clutching the small wooden crucifix Kaelen had pressed into her hand. "A lie," Safi countered, his eyes blazing with the fierce intensity she loved and feared. "The Templars will escort you to the port, but Baron de Morn's men, enraged by my infiltration and the loss of the courier, are waiting in the shadowed alleys. They will kill you before you reach the ship, claiming it was an infidel attack to discredit the Patriarch's mercy. Kaelen's sacrifice was for naught." Elara's blood ran cold. The final, bitter betrayal. "I knew the church was using your scandal to clean its own house," Safi continued. "I have arranged a different path. We ride south to my contacts in the Egyptian Sultanate. You will be free of the Crusader wars, free of the vows, free to be what you have become." He reached for her, his touch demanding, his love raw and true. "This is your last chance, Elara. The choice is final, duty or desire." Elara looked at the dark, the vast desert and the promise of a life unburdened by ancient loyalties. She looked back at the imposing walls of Jerusalem, now a tomb for Kaelen's honor. She had spent weeks agonizing over this choice, but in that moment, she realized she had to honor both men's sacrifices. She couldn't abandon the memory of Kaelen's nobility, but she also couldn't deny the fierce, life-saving passion of Safi. "I will not return to France in disguise, Safi," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I will not betray the memory of Kaelen's final act, but I will not die by the hands of corrupt men either." She looked up at him, her eyes resolute. "I will ride with you, Safi. You will help me escape the city, and then you will take me to the sea, where I will board the first ship bound for Europe, on my own terms. I choose my own path." Safi's face tightened with disappointment, but he accepted her conviction. "The path of the lone wolf. I should have known. So be it." But we must be fast. They're expecting your departure at dawn. Chapter 20. The Thode Path. They mounted the horse together, Safi in front, Elara clinging to his dark, powerful frame, the final, impossible intimacy of their love. Safi plunged them into the labyrinthine alleys of the city, riding against the impending dawn. They were near the Jaffa Gate when the ambush struck. De Morn's mercenaries, 8 of them, led by the cruel Ramon, now sporting a scar from Elara's knife, erupted from the shadows. The assassin and the witch! We will have a bounty on both of you, Ramon roared, blocking the narrow street. Safi drove the horse hard, attempting to break the line, but a mercenary caught the bridle. Safi immediately dismounted, drawing his dagger, pushing Elara behind the horse for cover. Go, get to the harbor, he commanded, turning to face the inevitable. Elara knew the horse would be caught. She jumped down, pulling the knife from her own belt, the small, familiar weapon. We fight, Safi, together. Safi smiled, a fierce, terrifying expression of pride and love. Always the warrior, Al-Ghariba. The fight was brutal. Safi, fueled by the conviction of his purpose, was magnificent. He danced around the heavy, armored men, his dagger a whirlwind of death. He was protecting her not just with his skill, but with the totality of his being. He managed to fell 3 mercenaries. But Ramon was cunning. He circled wide, focusing on Elara. Just as Ramon raised his sword to strike her down, Safi threw himself between them. The great, heavy sword meant for Elara sliced into Safi's side. Safi grunted, a sound of agony and finality, but he did not fall. He plunged his own dagger deep into Ramon's chest. Ramon gasped, crumbling to the ground. With the leader dead, the remaining mercenaries scattered, terrified of the assassin's lethal ferocity. Elara rushed to Safi, who had collapsed against the stone wall. His dark tunic was quickly staining black with blood, his breath shallow and ragged. "No, Safi, no!" Elara cried, holding him, her hands pressing futilely against the grievous wound. Safi looked up at her, his emerald eyes slowly losing their light, but still blazing with love and peace. "The circle is complete, Elara. The serpent's mark was indeed both poison and cure." He reached into his tunic, pulling out a small, intricately carved wooden box, the information Kaelen had been captured for. "The true message is here. Get it to the Sultan's agent in Cairo. It ensures peace. This is the cure for the Templars' disease." He smiled, a heartbreaking, beautiful expression. "You are free, Al-Ghariba. Be strong. Do not forget me." His strength faded, and the life left his green eyes, turning them to cold, still jade. Elara pressed her face to his chest, weeping not for the duty he had fulfilled, but for the impossible, forbidden love that had died with him. She had lost the 2 men who defined her, the noble anchor and the passionate storm. Chapter 21. The Marked Survivor. The sun was rising over Jerusalem, casting long, crimson shadows, the blood of the men who loved her staining the stones. Elara had no time for grief. She secured Safi's small box, kissed his cold forehead one last time, and mounted the remaining horse, riding hard for the coast, leaving the holy city and its wars behind. She reached the port of Jaffa, and using a small cache of coins Kaelen had insisted she carry, managed to secure passage on a small trading vessel bound for Cyprus. Intending to work her way west to France, she carried the weight of 2 extraordinary loves, 2 devastating losses, and a secret that could decide the fate of the Levant. A few days into the voyage, standing on the stern of the ship, watching the coastline of the Holy Land recede into the mist, a figure appeared near the main mast. It was the woman in black, her face shadowed by the severe cowl, her pale eyes fixed on the horizon. Elara walked toward her, no longer afraid. "You are the end, then," Elara stated, her voice quiet and steady. "I am the beginning," the mysterious woman rasped. "You chose the third path, Elara. Not Kaelen's duty, nor Safi's desire, but your own survival, forged in the heat of their sacrifice." She pointed a thin finger at Elara's heart. "You are marked. You lived because the knight sacrificed his nobility, and the assassin sacrificed his life. Their love has shaped your destiny." The woman then gestured to the vast, empty ocean ahead. "Go, Elara. Go home. You are no longer the farmer's daughter. You are the survivor, the woman who loved two enemies and carried the world's secrets in her palm. You will live long. You will live free, and you will never love so fully again." The woman turned, her black robes blending into the shadow of the mast. When Elara looked again, she was gone, leaving only the sound of the sea and the weight of the sun. Elara did not return to her village a mere farmer's daughter. She returned a woman forever changed, marked by the blood of the cross and the shadow of the serpent. She carried the wisdom of the battlefield and the complexity of forbidden love. She fulfilled Safi's final mission, ensuring the diplomatic courier's message, the cure, reached the Sultan's agent, helping to avert a wider, immediate slaughter. She never remarried, never spoke of the Knight Templar or the assassin, but every night, looking up at the vast, indifferent French sky, she saw two stars. One, a fixed, noble point of light, representing Kaelen's eternal duty. The other, a fast, dark star shooting across the firmament, representing Safi's passionate freedom. She was the dark, fertile earth below them, forever connected to both, forever surviving, marked by love, loss, and destiny. And so, the sands settle on Elara's perilous journey. Her story, a testament to courage, to duty, and to the fierce, unforgiving fire of forbidden love, has reached its heartbreaking conclusion. Thank you for enduring the Crusades, for braving the desert, and for standing with Elara as she navigated the most impossible of choices. This has been The Maiden and the Templar's Vow, an original, epic romantasy novel, brought to you by Velvet Valor Romantasy Audiobook. If you were swept away by the noble sacrifice of the knight, tormented by the passionate intensity of the assassin, and uplifted by the sheer resilience of Elara, then you are officially a member of the Velvet Valor family. Don't let the adventure end here. Hit that subscribe button. Join us for more emotional, immersive, and utterly addictive romantasy adventures, inspired by history, myth, and magic. Tap the like button if you think Kaelen's final sacrifice was the definition of true love, or if Safi's passionate rebellion won your heart. And most importantly, comment below. Tell us, if you were Elara, who would you have chosen in the end? Duty or desire? We love reading your theories, your tears, and your favorite moments from this epic tale. Your subscriptions, likes, and comments fuel our journey to bring you more immersive stories. Until the next adventure unfolds, keep that candle of courage burning bright. Farewell for now from Velvet Valor Romantasy Audiobook.